For years, I shouldered the responsibility of being both the breadwinner and mother until my body collapsed from illness after all those years of shouldering the responsibility. Then my son said, "Mom, you are just a burden to me now." He wanted to abandon me and sue me to seize the property. The surprise that made me change my will was from a stranger who saw me as a mother and not a burden. And that's when everything changed for me. Let me take you back to where it began. I used to believe that a bakery could hold a family together. The smell of fresh bread, the warmth of cinnamon rolls pulled straight from the oven, the laughter of children with sugar on their cheeks. Those were the things that made life feel safe, whole, worth living. My name is Eloise, and for 63 years, I've lived in a small coastal town in Oregon where the gulls never stop crying and the waves never stop crashing against the rocks. People know me here as the Bread Lady. For more than 3 decades, I owned a little bakery on the corner of Main Street. The shop was modest, barely wide enough for a few tables and a counter, but it was filled with the kind of warmth you can't buy. The glow of ovens, the sound of kneading dough, the comfort of food that always seemed to taste better when shared. But the bakery wasn't just a business to me. It was my anchor, my sanctuary, my proof that I could keep my family whole after the world tried to break it apart. 15 years ago, I lost my husband. One moment he was laughing in the kitchen, teasing me about putting too much sugar in the pecan pie, and the next he was gone, an unexpected heart attack stealing him away in an instant. I remember the way the sound of his chair scraping across the floor still echoed in my ears for weeks afterward, long after the chair itself sat empty. That day, my life split in two. Before, I had been a wife, a partner, someone who could lean on another pair of shoulders when the world grew heavy. After, I was simply a mother, holding everything together for the sake of the only piece of him I had left, our son, Nathan. Nathan was my reason for everything. From the moment he was born, I had sworn that his life would be bigger, brighter, safer than mine had ever been. I stayed up through the nights when he was sick, sold wedding jewelry when tuition came due, and spent every penny I made in that bakery to give him opportunities I never had. I poured my soul into that shop not because I wanted success, but because I wanted him to feel proud. Every loaf of bread was baked with his future in mind. Every early morning, every aching back, every burn on my hands was worth it if it meant Nathan would never feel the kind of hunger or fear I had known growing up. When he was little, he would sit on the flour sacks in the corner of the bakery, his legs dangling, swinging back and forth as he watched me work. I used to slip him scraps of dough to play with, and he'd mold them into crooked little stars and hearts. Customers would laugh, call him my assistant, and I'd smile as though nothing in the world could ever come between us. Even now, if I close my eyes, I can still hear his small voice echoing in the bakery. "Mama, will you make my favorite rolls tomorrow?" And I always did. The bakery became our second home. Holidays were marked not by gifts but by recipes. Gingerbread at Christmas, berry pies in July, pumpkin loaves every autumn. People said they could taste love in my food, but what they didn't know was that the love wasn't for them. It was for Nathan. Every pastry I sold, every loaf that left the oven, was part of a silent promise that his life would be filled with more than mine had ever been. Time has a way of slipping through your fingers like flour dust. One day Nathan was a boy shaping crooked stars in the dough, and the next he was a man walking out my front door, diploma in hand, his eyes set on a life far away from the sea air and the smell of yeast. I remember the pride swelling in my chest when he graduated, but I also remember the hollow ache when he left. He married young, into a family with money, a different world than mine, polished and sharp, with dinners that didn't taste like home. When he moved out, my house fell quiet. The bakery became even more important, because without it, I had nothing but silence to fill my days. The truth is, I never remarried, never even considered it. After my husband, after Nathan, all I had left was the bakery. Its walls absorbed my laughter and my tears. Its counters bore the weight of my grief, and its ovens kept me warm through winters that felt colder without anyone to share the bed. For 15 years, I have lived alone. My neighbors know me, wave politely, but at night the house is silent. The only voices are the ones in my memory, my husband's laughter, my son's boyish chatter, the echoes of a life that feels both close enough to touch and impossibly far away. Sometimes I wonder if I gave too much to Nathan, if, in trying to give him the world, I forgot to hold on to him. Maybe he never understood that the bakery was never about bread. It was about love, about him, about us. Now, In the stillness of my old age, the bakery is closed, the oven's cold, but I can still smell the ghost of cinnamon and yeast in my hands. I can still see the sunlight spilling across the counter where Nathan once sat, swinging his legs. And I can still feel the ache of everything I lost. My husband, my family, the life I thought I was building. I am Eloise, a widow, a baker, a mother who gave everything, and somehow it feels like I'm already forgotten. The air in the doctor's office was too clean, too sharp, like it had been scrubbed of comfort. The blinds were half drawn, stripes of gray light cutting across the desk, across my folded hands. I tried not to look at the monitor glowing beside him because I already knew the numbers weren't in my favor. Dr. Myers was a kind man, but kindness doesn't soften words like these. He cleared his throat, sat forward, and looked at me with a mixture of pity and professionalism. That look, the one doctors practice when they have to dismantle someone's world without collapsing themselves. "Mrs. Harper," he began, "your kidneys are failing. Stage 5. It's terminal without treatment. You'll need dialysis 3 times a week, every week for the rest of your life. Without it, months, maybe less." The words hit like stones thrown into still water. Each one rippled through me, spreading outward, shattering everything I thought was certain. Dialysis, 3 times a week, for life. I nodded, pretending to be composed, but my insides were breaking apart. Dialysis. The word tasted metallic in my mouth, like the bitterness of blood. I thought of the bakery I once ran, how my hands used to knead dough with strength and purpose. Those same hands now trembled in my lap. I thought of my husband, gone for 15 years, and wondered if he was waiting somewhere just out of sight. Most of all, I thought of Nathan, my boy, my only child. The doctor asked softly, "Do you have support at home? Someone who can help you through this?" My answer came fast, almost too fast. Yes, a son. And I clung to that like it was oxygen. The drive home was a blur. Oregon's coastline stretched out beside me, waves crashing against rocks, gulls circling in the slate-gray sky, but I barely saw it. My mind replayed the doctor's words on a loop. Stage 5, dialysis, borrowed time. When I got home, the silence of the house pressed down on me. I picked up the phone and dialed Nathan. 1 ring, 2, 3. Voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. By the 3rd attempt, my chest tightened. I left a message, my voice small, unsteady. "Hey, it's Mom. I came back from the doctor. It's serious. They say I need dialysis. I don't want to scare you, but I need you. Please call me." I placed the phone on the table, staring at it like a candle in the dark. Any second, I thought. Any second he'll call back. Minutes crawled into hours. Nothing. That night I sat by the window listening to the ocean roar. The tide came in and out, faithful and endless, while my phone sat lifeless on the table. I checked it over and over, my stomach sinking each time. Finally, just before midnight, the screen lit up. Relief surged through me so fiercely it nearly hurt. His name. My son. I opened the message with shaking hands. The words. That was all. "Mom, you are just a burden to me now." I read it once, twice, 10 times, each reading colder than the last. "You are just a burden to me now." That was his answer to my illness, his answer to 30 years of sacrifice, of flour-dusted mornings, of nights I went without sleep to make sure he had enough. That was what my life boiled down to, a chore he didn't have time for. My throat closed, my eyes blurred. I pressed the phone to my chest, rocking in the chair as though it might erase the ache. I remembered the little boy who used to sit in the bakery, his legs swinging off flour sacks. The boy who asked me to taste the dough, who left sticky fingerprints on the counter. The boy who once hugged me tight after I made him a rocket ship cake for his 8th birthday and whispered, "You're the best mom." Where was he now? Where had he gone? I tried to imagine the message I had wanted. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be there tomorrow." I could almost hear it, feel his voice in my ears. But the truth glared back at me from the cold blue glow of my phone. "Mom, you are just a burden to me now." The silence of the house deepened, heavy as stone. The next day, I went for my first dialysis. The waiting room was lined with chairs, patients hooked to machines, their faces tired but resigned. The nurse guided me gently, her voice calm, but I barely heard her. My mind kept drifting to the empty seat beside me. I had left it open, hoping, ridiculously, that Nathan might walk in, that he'd sit down, roll his eyes, but stay. But the chair remained empty. Hours later, I rode the hospital shuttle home alone, rain streaking the windows, the world outside a blur of gray and seafoam. That night, I typed a message. Nathan, I don't want a nurse. I just want you. My thumb hovered over the send button, but then I pictured his face, blank, impatient, already gone. I deleted it because I already knew the truth. I wasn't part of his life anymore, not as a mother, not as a thought, not even as an obligation worth keeping. And that truth cut deeper than the diagnosis itself, because illness wounds the body, but abandonment, it shatters the soul. The days after Nathan's message blurred into one long night. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, those 7 words burned against the darkness. Mom, you are just a burden to me now. They pulsed in my chest louder than the failing beat of my own body. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak with age, the refrigerator hum, the distant crash of waves. But silence was the loudest sound of all. Silence and the certainty that I was no longer needed in the world of my only child. By the 4th night without rest, my body felt like glass, thin, brittle, ready to shatter. My hands trembled as I moved around the house. Simple tasks felt monumental. Even the thought of making tea exhausted me. That evening, I opened the refrigerator to take out a loaf of bread I'd baked weeks earlier, still wrapped in wax paper. Bread used to be my comfort, the one thing that always made me feel steady. I thought maybe if I ate a slice, it might anchor me again. But as I reached inside, the world tilted. The hum of the refrigerator deepened into a roar. My vision fractured into shards of light. I felt myself sway, tried to steady against the counter, but my legs gave out beneath me. The bread slipped from my hands. The wax paper split open as it hit the tile, scattering crumbs across the floor. Then came the fall. I hit hard. My head struck the corner of a cabinet. A white-hot pain shot through me, and then everything slowed, like time itself had fractured. I remember the sharp smell of onions from the fridge mixing with the metallic taste of blood at the back of my throat. I remember the clock ticking steadily above me, indifferent to my collapse. My body refused to move, limbs heavy, my breath shallow and uneven. In the haze, I whispered his name. Nathan. My voice was so faint I barely heard it myself, but there was no answer. Only the buzz of the refrigerator and the echo of my own loneliness. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? The edges of my vision darkened until only a small circle of light remained. My chest heaved in shallow bursts, each breath a battle. It was the sound of knocking that pulled me back. Then voices, my neighbors. Eloise, are you all right? Their footsteps hurried closer, the door creaked open. A gasp. Then a rush of movement. Call 911, she's on the floor. The room swam around me as hands touched my shoulder, voices overlapping, urgent, frightened. I wanted to tell them I was fine, that I just needed a moment, but the words stuck in my throat. Sirens came next. The rising wail cut through the night, loud and merciless. Red and blue lights flashed against the walls of my kitchen. Paramedics crowded into the small space, their hands efficient, their questions sharp and practiced. Can you hear me? Ma'am, stay with us. I tried to answer, but my voice failed. All I managed was a weak nod. They lifted me onto a stretcher, the world tilting again as they maneuvered through the narrow doorway. The cold night air hit my skin, the smell of salt and rain sharper than ever. The neighbors stood outside, their faces pale with concern, but their eyes quickly dropped when I met them. Sympathy? Yes. But distance, too. I wasn't their family. No one was. The ambulance rattled down the coastal road, sirens fading in and out. The paramedic at my side checked my vitals, adjusted tubes, spoke in clipped tones to the driver. To them, I was another patient, another number, another body to keep alive. And maybe that's all I was now. I stared at the ceiling of the ambulance, the fluorescent lights glaring. I thought of Nathan again, wondered if anyone had called him. Wondered if he'd even answer. I imagined him seeing an unknown number on his phone, sighing, pressing decline. The image burned deeper than the pain in my chest. The hospital was colder than the night outside. They wheeled me through endless corridors, the walls sterile, the smell of antiseptic clinging to every breath. Machines beeped around me, monitors flashing my body's weaknesses in green and red. Nurses adjusted IV lines, murmured updates, but no familiar voices broke through the noise. When they finally settled me into a room, I looked to the doorway, half expecting him, half hoping. But the doorway stayed empty. There were no flowers waiting, no hand to hold, no soft words to remind me I mattered. Only the mechanical heartbeat of monitors, only the hiss of oxygen, only the knowledge that I was alive because strangers had carried me here, not because my son cared enough to come. I turned my head to the side, the pillow stiff beneath me. The hospital room was bare except for a chair in the corner. I stared at it until my eyes blurred, imagining Nathan sitting there, scrolling on his phone, pretending not to care, but present all the same. But when I blinked, it was still empty. And in that emptiness, I realized something more painful than the diagnosis, more cutting than the fall. I was already gone from his life, invisible, unwanted, forgotten. Hospitals have a way of stripping you bare, not just your clothes, but your dignity, your comfort, even your sense of belonging. Days blurred together into the hum of machines, the hiss of oxygen, the shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors. Meals came on trays, lukewarm and tasteless. I ate them slowly, alone, staring out the window at the gray Oregon sky. It was during one of those meals that she appeared. At first, I barely noticed her. A young woman in scrubs, pushing a cart stacked with freshly laundered sheets, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She couldn't have been more than 28. Her shoes squeaked against the floor, the kind of sound that usually grated on me. But that day, it pulled me from the fog of my thoughts. She glanced into my room, saw me eating by myself, and paused. "Hi there," she said, her voice unexpectedly bright in the sterile air. "Mind if I keep you company for a minute?" I blinked at her, startled. Strangers didn't just ask that. Nurses came and went, efficient and polite, but no one lingered. No one asked to sit. I cleared my throat, my voice rough. "I'm fine. You don't need to." She smiled anyway, as if my refusal didn't matter. "I know I don't need to, but maybe I want to." Something about her tone, gentle but insistent, made me set down my fork. She wheeled her cart just inside the doorway and leaned against it, arms crossed casually, as though we were two neighbors chatting across a fence. "I'm Kira," she offered. "Laundry service." Not exactly glamorous, but hey, someone's got to make sure your sheets smell like lavender. I almost laughed, though it came out more like a scoff. "Lavender doesn't fix much." "True," she said with a shrug, "but it's a start." There was something disarming about her. Still, I wasn't ready. My heart was raw, too bruised from Nathan's absence. So I turned my gaze back to the window, hoping she'd take the hint. But Kira didn't leave. The next day she came back. This time she wasn't pushing her laundry cart. Instead, she held a small napkin-wrapped bundle. "Don't tell anyone," she whispered, placing it on my tray. "I baked these. Chocolate chip. Not hospital food, I promise." I frowned. "Why?" She tilted her head. "Because you looked like you needed something sweet yesterday." I stared at the cookie, at the crumbs already flaking onto the napkin. Suspicion pricked at me. Why was she doing this? People don't just give without wanting something back. Not in my experience. So I pushed the bundle aside. "You shouldn't waste your time on me." Her eyes softened, but she didn't argue. She just nodded and left. But the following day she came again, another napkin, another cookie, another quiet smile. "You don't have to eat it," she said, setting it gently on the table. "I just like bringing them." That day, I didn't push it away. I picked it up, broke it in half, and took a bite. It was warm, gooey, imperfect. Not the kind of thing you buy in a store. The taste startled me. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it carried something I hadn't felt in months. Care. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears I didn't expect. Kira noticed but didn't comment. She just sat in the chair by my bed, swinging her legs slightly like a child. For a while, we didn't speak, and somehow, that silence felt less lonely than any I'd had before. In the days that followed, she kept coming back, sometimes with cookies, sometimes just with a smile and a story about her day. She told me about the ridiculous pile of sheets she had to fold, about how one of the nurses always played the same old country music in the laundry room, about the way she sometimes burned her first batch of cookies because she forgot the timer. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I listened. I learned she was 28, had grown up bouncing between foster homes, never really had a family to call her own. She said it like a joke, but there was something in her eyes, something raw and unhealed. "Guess that makes us both kind of alone, huh?" she said once, half smiling. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that at least she was young, that she had time to build something for herself. But the words stuck. Because the truth was, she was right. We were both adrift, both invisible in different ways. It wasn't sudden, the bond between us. It crept in slowly, quietly, like yeast rising in dough. One day, I realized I was looking forward to the squeak of her shoes in the hallway. I found myself waiting for her smile, her chatter, the way she made the sterile hospital room feel almost human. For the first time in months, I felt something other than emptiness. It wasn't love, not in the romantic sense. It wasn't obligation, like what I had once hoped from Nathan. It was something simpler, purer. The fragile beginnings of connection. Kira, the laundry girl, with tired eyes and a stubborn kindness, had managed to do what no one else could. She made me feel seen again, and that, I realized, was the start of everything that would follow. It started with small things. Always small things. Kira had a way of sliding into my days without asking permission. At first, it was a cookie here, a short chat there, but soon it became routine. I found myself expecting her, listening for the squeak of her shoes in the hallway, the gentle knock before she let herself in. One afternoon, she wheeled in her laundry cart, but instead of leaving right away, she dropped into the chair by my bed and turned on the TV. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, already flipping through channels. I should have minded. It was my room, my silence, my solitude. But when she landed on a rerun of an old cooking show and gasped, "Oh my God, I love this one," I surprised myself by laughing. We sat there together, watching two strangers argue over soufflés, Kira making commentary like a sports announcer. "Look at him whip those egg whites. He's way too confident. That's gonna collapse." For the first time since my diagnosis, I laughed until my stomach hurt. Another day, she walked in carrying a notebook. "Okay, serious question," she said, plopping down beside me. "If you could design the perfect dessert menu for a bakery, what would you put on it?" I blinked at her, startled. "Why?" She shrugged, twirling her pen. "Because I've always wondered what real bakers think about, and because—" Her voice softened. "You light up every time you talk about your bakery." The words stopped me cold. I hadn't realized it, but she was right. Talking about bread, about pastries, about sugar and flour, that was when I felt most alive. My bakery had been my life's work, the stage where I'd poured every ounce of love and sacrifice. So we began. She wrote down my ideas: apple turnovers with cinnamon glaze, lemon tarts, eclairs filled with custard. My handwriting shook too much to write it myself, but she scribbled faithfully, her tongue poking out the side of her mouth in concentration. By the end of the afternoon, we had a list so long it covered 3 pages. She grinned at it as though it were a treasure map. "We're opening Eloise's Bakery 2.0 someday. Just wait." I rolled my eyes, but something inside me stirred, a flicker of hope I thought had died long ago. The turning point came late one evening. Kira appeared in the doorway, holding a bowl and looking guilty. "Don't laugh," she said, stepping inside. "I tried to bake something. It's kind of a disaster." She set the bowl on my tray. Inside were lumpy, uneven cookies, some burned at the edges, some raw in the center. I couldn't help but chuckle. "You forgot the timer again, didn't you?" She pouted. "Maybe." I broke one in half, crumbs scattering. It was dense, chewy, clumsy, but I ate it anyway. "Not bad," I said, and her face lit up like I'd handed her a medal. That night, I guided her through a recipe step by step, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "Cream the butter first, don't rush it. Sugar needs time to melt. Treat it like coaxing a friend to talk." Her brow furrowed in concentration, her hands clumsy but eager. Watching her reminded me of teaching Nathan once when he was little and impatient. Only this time, the student listened. She wanted to learn. For the first time in years, I felt useful again. Needed. Over the following weeks, our bond grew in those quiet, ordinary moments. We watched TV game shows and argued over the answers. We sketched silly logos for the imaginary bakery. Sometimes, she'd braid my thinning hair while I told her stories about the early days with my husband, the way he'd propose by hiding a ring inside a loaf of bread, the tiny bakery we opened with nothing but a borrowed oven and blind faith. She listened like no one ever had, not even Nathan. One night, after laughing too hard at a sitcom, I wiped tears from my eyes and said without thinking, "You're such a good girl, Kira, my sweet girl." Her face froze, then softened. "No one's ever called me that before," she whispered. My chest ached at the honesty in her voice. I reached for her hand, squeezed it. "Well, I mean it. You're like a daughter to me." She swallowed hard, her eyes shining. "Then, can I call you Mom, just once?" The word caught in my throat. I hadn't heard it spoken with that much warmth in years. Nathan had stopped saying it long ago, replacing Mom with curt phone calls, with silence. But from Kira, it felt real. Earned. I nodded, tears slipping free. "Yes. Yes, you can." And so she did. Tentative at first, then firmer, more natural. "Good night, Mom." "Want some water, Mom?" "That's too much sugar, Mom, even for you." Each time the word healed something raw inside me. It didn't matter that we weren't bound by blood. What mattered was that she saw me. She stayed when no one else did. She laughed with me, baked with me, dreamed with me. And in those fragile hospital nights, under the flicker of fluorescent lights, we stitched together a new kind of family, born not of obligation, but of choice. For the first time in so long, I wasn't invisible. I was someone's mother again. Kira didn't tell me everything at once. Her stories came in fragments, half-spoken truths dropped between jokes, pieces of a puzzle she'd never thought anyone cared enough to finish. But one evening, when the rain tapped steadily against the hospital window, she finally let the pieces fall into place. "You asked about my family," she began softly. "The truth is, I don't really have one." Her voice was low, steady, but there was a tremor under it, like a string stretched too tight. Her mother had died when she was just 5. "I remember the hospital room," Kira said, eyes distant. "I remember holding her hand. It was so small, so cold. She promised me we'd go home, but she never woke up." The memory still lived in her voice, sharp and raw. After that, she was placed in foster care. A different bed, different walls, strangers telling her when to eat, when to sleep, how to behave. They always said, "We'll take care of you." But I knew they were lying. I was just filling a space. One family kept her for 3 years. To a child, 3 years was forever. She let herself believe. She called them Mom and Dad. She drew them pictures and taped them to the fridge. She thought she was home. Until the morning she came downstairs to find her suitcase by the door. "They said I was too much trouble," she whispered, like I was a shirt that didn't fit anymore. They handed me back to social services and closed the door. I stood there with my suitcase like garbage left on the curb. Her face was calm as she spoke, but her hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white. After that, no one wanted her. Families passed her file back and forth, shaking their heads. By 13, she was placed in a nursing home, not because I was sick, but because there was nowhere else to put me. She laughed, bitter and hollow. Imagine being 13, surrounded by people in wheelchairs, their skin paper thin, their breaths rattling. Every day I watched them fade. I was too young to belong there, too old to belong anywhere else. I'd push old ladies to the dining hall just to have someone talk to me. I used to pretend they were my grandmothers, but when they died, I didn't even get to cry. The staff told me, "Don't get attached." Her voice cracked then. I reached out, placed my hand over hers, and felt her shaking. At 16, the loneliness became unbearable. One icy evening, she walked to the bridge outside town. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes. The river below churned dark and merciless. I thought, why not? Who would care? No one wanted me. I was tired of being passed around like I didn't matter. She climbed onto the railing, her shoes slipping on the frozen metal. She spread her arms, staring at the black water, ready to let go. But then, music. Soft, fragile notes floating through the winter air. A piano. Someone was playing just beyond the bridge. Kira froze. The sound was faint but clear, threading through the cold like a lifeline. She turned her head. Through the snow, she saw warm light spilling from the windows of a small bakery. And there, just inside, a woman moved gracefully behind the counter. In the corner stood an old upright piano, its keys yellowed with age. The woman played as she worked, her voice humming quietly along. The melody was simple, tender, not professional, not polished. But to Kira, it was everything. I remember sitting on the sidewalk that night just listening, she whispered. The music kept me there, kept me alive. When the lights went out, I walked away instead of jumping. That piano, it saved me. My heart stilled. I remembered. That had been my bakery, my piano, my hands. I used to play in the evenings while I wiped the counters, because silence felt too heavy after closing. Customers would sometimes pause to listen. I never thought it mattered. But it had mattered. To her. To a girl on the edge of the bridge. My throat tightened as realization struck. Kira, I whispered, that was me. That was my bakery, my piano. She froze, eyes wide. What? I used to play after closing, to keep myself company. My voice broke. The bakery you saw, that was mine. Her lips parted. For a long moment, neither of us breathed. Then her eyes filled with tears. So, it was you? You're the reason I didn't. Her words trailed off, but the weight of them filled the room. I nodded, unable to speak. The silence between us was different now. Thick, heavy, but not empty. Something had clicked into place, like two broken pieces of glass fitting perfectly together. She had been the girl outside in the snow. I had been the woman inside, playing piano to fill my loneliness. Neither of us knew the other existed, but on that night, across the dark, a thread had stretched between us. Now, years later, fate, or something like it, had pulled that thread tight. Kira reached for my hand, her grip fierce, trembling. Then maybe we were meant to find each other, she whispered. Maybe we always were. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe in something larger than pain. Nights in the hospital were the worst. The machines hummed, the monitors blinked, and the walls pressed in with a silence so heavy it felt alive. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Nathan's message etched in my mind. Mom, you are just a burden to me now. The words that had hollowed me out more than the diagnosis itself. I thought of all the years behind me, the mornings in the bakery, the flour that clung to my hair, the way Nathan's small hands used to tug at my apron. I thought of the nights I stayed awake while he coughed in the next room, afraid to close my eyes. I thought of how I had spent my youth saving, working, giving, believing it all went toward building him a better life. And now, in my twilight years, my son had already erased me. The thought festered, night after night, until it hardened into something sharp and unmovable. I couldn't change the past, but I could change the future. The next morning, I dialed my lawyer's number. Mr. Harris, this is Eloise Harper. I need to make changes to my will. There was a pause, then his measured voice. Of course. What kind of changes are we talking about? I swallowed. My mouth was dry, but my voice didn't waver. Everything. The house, the savings, whatever's left. I want it all to go to someone else. Not your son? His tone was cautious, as though stepping onto thin ice. No, I said, more firmly than I expected. Not anymore. We arranged for him to come to the hospital later that week. When the day arrived, the room felt colder than usual. Mr. Harris came with his briefcase, his suit too stiff for the sterile ward. He set the papers neatly on my tray, sliding a pen toward me. Mrs. Harper, he said carefully, I want to be sure you understand the consequences. Disinheriting your son may create conflict. I met his eyes. There's already conflict. This just makes it honest. He nodded, adjusted his glasses, and began reading through the clauses. His voice was steady, but I could feel him watching me between lines, searching for hesitation. There was none. When the notary entered and placed the seal beside me, I took the pen in my trembling hand. Signing wasn't easy. My fingers ached, my strength waned, but each stroke of ink felt like carving truth into stone. Eloise Harper, no longer defined by obligation. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter. The weight I'd carried for years, the illusion that Nathan would one day return my love, slipped from me. The papers were packed away, the lawyer left with polite efficiency, and I sat alone in the quiet aftermath. I had done it. I had chosen. That evening, I asked the nurse for a tablet. I need to record a message, I said. She hesitated, then set it on the tray before me. When the screen lit up and I saw my reflection, I almost faltered. The woman staring back at me looked old, worn, almost unrecognizable. Tubes clung to her arm, shadows bruised her eyes, but there was something fierce still burning in her gaze. I pressed record. Nathan. Even saying his name cut deep. If you're watching this, then you already know. I've changed my will. I've left nothing for you. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to continue. Do you know why? Because I gave you everything already. My love, my labor, my entire life. And when I needed you, you gave me 7 words. Mom, you're just a burden to me now. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. You made it clear, Nathan. You don't need me. Not as a mother, not as a part of your life. So I won't burden you with my belongings. I won't leave you anything out of obligation. I leaned closer, my tone sharpening, each word a blade. I don't need a mother, so I won't leave anything as an obligation. Silence. Only my breathing, uneven, echoing in the sterile room. I stared at the camera for a long moment before reaching out and pressing stop. When the screen went black, the room seemed even emptier than before. The weight of my words lingered in the air, heavy and irreversible. I sat back, exhausted, staring at the still tablet. Part of me wanted to cry, to grieve for what I had severed, but the tears didn't come. Instead, there was a strange calm, a quiet certainty. I had spoken the truth. Nathan had chosen his life without me, and I had finally chosen mine without him. Later that night, Kira slipped in with her usual smile in a small paper bag. Don't laugh, she said, pulling out 2 crooked muffins. I tried a new recipe. They're edible, I think. I smiled, weak but real. She didn't know about the papers, about the video. To her, we were just sharing another evening, another small piece of life. As she chattered about flour and sugar, her laughter filling the sterile air, I realized something with piercing clarity. Blood may have abandoned me, but love, unexpected, stubborn, chosen, was still here. And it was enough. The message came just after sunset. I had just finished another dialysis session, my body heavy, my skin clammy. The hospital room was drenched in orange light, the sky outside a watercolor of dying sun. My phone buzzed once, twice, until the vibration rattled against the metal tray. When I reached for it, my breath caught. Nathan. For one foolish, fragile moment, my heart leapt. Maybe, finally, he had remembered I was his mother. Maybe he would ask how I felt, or if I needed anything. But when I opened the message, my heart sank like a stone. So it's true? You rewrote the will? You're giving everything to the janitor girl? Not Kira, not even your friend. Just the janitor girl. Before I could process, another message followed. Are you out of your mind? After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Another. She's nothing. A parasite. You're a fool if you think she cares about you. My hand shook as I scrolled. Each word hit like a slap. Each line stripped me bare. I stared at the phone until the letters blurred. My chest tightened, breath shallow, then it rang. His name lit up the screen. For a long moment I considered ignoring it, letting it buzz into silence. But my thumb betrayed me, sliding across to answer. Mom, he spat, the word sharp as a curse. What the hell are you thinking? I swallowed, my voice quiet but firm. I'm thinking of the truth, Nathan. Something you've avoided for a long time. Don't play games with me, he snapped. You're really going to give away my inheritance to some stranger who washes hospital sheets? Do you even hear yourself? She's not a stranger, I said steady. She's the one who's been here, the one who hasn't left me alone. I'm your son, he thundered. Wow, that should be enough. I closed my eyes, the ache spreading through my chest. It's not enough, Nathan. Being my son doesn't excuse the silence. It doesn't excuse the abandonment. He scoffed, his laughter bitter and sharp. You're pathetic. You think she loves you? You're just a lonely old woman clinging to the first person who bothers to look at you. She's after your money, that's all. She's after nothing, I shot back, my voice rising. She gives without asking. She listens. She cares. That's more than you've done in years. There was a long pause. Then his voice came back, colder, quieter. So you'd rather have her than me? Some girl who doesn't share your blood? You'd throw me away like trash? After everything I am to you? My throat burned. I wanted to scream. What are you to me, Nathan? Tell me. Instead, my voice cracked but stayed firm. Blood doesn't make love. You proved that when you told me to hire a nurse. You gave me 7 words, Nathan. 7 words when I needed you most. That's all I was worth to you. He was silent. For a heartbeat, I thought I had pierced the armor, found the boy I once held. But the silence shattered with his next words. You'll regret this. When she bleeds you dry, when everyone finds out you were manipulated, don't come crying to me. I'll make sure the courts see you for what you are, a confused, bitter old woman. My hand trembled, but not from fear, from fury. Nathan, I said slowly, every word deliberate, no one is born deserving love. It's not automatic. It's not owed. Love has to be learned, given, nurtured, and you never learned. Don't you dare lecture me, he snarled. Why, I'm your son. That's the only thing that matters. Tears pricked my eyes, but they didn't fall. My voice steadied into something I hadn't felt in years. No, Nathan. The only thing that matters is love, and you've forgotten how to give it. I don't have time left to teach you anymore. His breath caught on the other end, sharp and angry. Then we're finished. Yes, I whispered, my chest heavy but certain. We are. The line went dead. The silence afterward was crushing. My hand fell to my lap, the phone still glowing faintly. My heart pounded, not from weakness, but from the finality of what had just happened. For years, I had carried the hope that Nathan would come back, that he would walk into my room one day, smiling, and say he was sorry, that he still loved me. But hope had been shattered tonight. The door creaked softly, and Kira slipped in, carrying a folded stack of linens. She stopped short when she saw my face. Mom? What happened? I turned toward her, my voice hoarse. He knows, and he's gone. She set the linens aside and knelt by my bed, her hand closing gently over mine. Her eyes were fierce, unwavering. Then let him go. He chose his path. You don't need to carry his cruelty anymore. I looked at her, at the steady kindness in her face, and felt something break loose inside me. Not despair this time, but release. For the first time in years, I understood. I didn't lose a son tonight. I lost a shadow. And in its place, I found the light of someone who chose to stay. The envelope was heavy before I even opened it, as though it already carried the weight of betrayal. Inside, the cold clinical language of lawyers. Petition to contest the will. Accusations in black ink, undue influence, manipulation, exploitation of an elderly, terminally ill woman. The woman was me. The so-called manipulator was Kira. Nathan hadn't just rejected me. He had weaponized me. Within days, the storm burst beyond the courtroom walls. Reporters circled like gulls on the pier, drawn by the scent of a story they could sink their beaks into. The first headline landed on the front page of the local paper. Cinderella or con artist? Widow's fortune sparks family feud. It spread like wildfire. Online blogs, gossip columns, radio hosts. One grainy photograph showed me being wheeled through the hospital halls, my face pale, tubes dangling like ropes. The caption, too frail to decide for herself? Another showed Kira outside the hospital cafeteria, still in her faded scrubs, holding a coffee cup. She looked exhausted, hair pulled into a messy bun, her face downcast. The headline mocked, Modern Cinderella or Master Manipulator? Comment sections filled with strangers passing judgment as if they'd lived our lives. Of course she's after the money. Classic gold digger move. She probably targeted the old woman from the start. Every word sliced into Kira like a blade. I found her in the laundry room one night, long after visiting hours. She sat on the bench, a pile of sheets beside her, her head buried in her hands. They're calling me a thief, she whispered without looking up. They don't even know me, but they're certain I'm some monster who preyed on you. Her shoulders shook. And maybe I should just let them believe it. Maybe I should walk away. If I disappear, maybe all this will stop. The sound of her voice, so broken, nearly shattered me. Don't you dare say that, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Don't you dare let him take away the truth. Nathan is twisting everything, but he can't twist who you are. She finally lifted her head, her eyes rimmed red. But what if he wins? What if people never stop believing I used you? I reached for her hand. It was cold, trembling. Then let them believe lies. The truth doesn't need their approval to exist. You gave me love when no one else did. That's not theft. That's salvation. Her lips quivered, but the tears kept spilling. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Then lean on me, I said firmly. I may be sick, but I'm not powerless, and I will not let my son destroy the only good thing left in my life. Meanwhile, Nathan's campaign grew louder. He strode into the courthouse flanked by his lawyer, speaking to reporters with the smugness of a man who thought the world was already his. "I love my mother," he said smoothly, cameras flashing. "But she's unwell. She doesn't know what she's doing." This girl, this laundry worker, took advantage of her vulnerability. We can't let that stand. Reporters scribbled furiously, eager to paint him as the dutiful son protecting his mother's legacy. When I saw the clip later that night on the hospital television, bile rose in my throat. The audacity, the performance, as though the son who ignored my calls and texts had suddenly become my savior. I wanted to throw something at the screen. Instead, I pressed my fist against my chest, trying to steady the storm raging inside me. Kira, meanwhile, shrank beneath the pressure. She avoided the cafeteria, she skipped meals. She walked the halls with her head down, as if hiding from every passing glance. One afternoon, I caught her folding sheets so violently the fabric tore. "He's winning," she muttered. "Everyone looks at me like I'm guilty, like I'm disgusting. And maybe," her voice cracked, "maybe they're right." "No," I snapped, louder than I intended. She froze. I softened my voice, but not my resolve. "Listen to me. Nathan has money, lawyers, headlines, but he doesn't have love. That's why he can't win, not truly. The only power he has is making you doubt yourself. Don't hand him that victory." Her eyes glistened. She shook her head. "I don't know how much longer I can take this." "Then hold on one day longer," I whispered, squeezing her hand. "Hold on for me. Hold on for the truth." But the truth in those days felt fragile. The walls of the hospital closed in, each headline another blow, each whisper another knife. Nathan had dragged us into a public trial, one where the jury wasn't just 12 strangers in a courtroom, it was the entire town, armed with gossip and suspicion. And in that courtroom of shadows and noise, Kira was already branded guilty. But I knew what he didn't. I had a voice, I had proof, and when the time came, I would use them. Because love, however fragile, was still stronger than lies. The courthouse smelled of old wood and polish, its walls echoing with whispers and footsteps. I sat in my wheelchair near the front, Kira beside me, her hands twisted nervously in her lap, her face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. This was no longer just about money. It was about dignity, mine, hers, and the truth that had been buried under Nathan's lies. The judge entered, his gavel striking once. "Court is now in session." Nathan's lawyer rose first, crisp suit, practiced charm. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case. A loving son finds his mother, elderly, frail, and gravely ill, has been manipulated by a hospital laundry worker. This woman, Kira, preyed upon Mrs. Harper's vulnerability, convincing her to alter her will. We ask the court to invalidate this unjust document." Nathan sat smugly beside him, his jaw set, eyes flashing toward me with a mix of contempt and triumph. Then my lawyer stood, calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, the narrative of manipulation is not only false but cruel. Mrs. Harper's choice was deliberate, lucid, and recorded. Today we will show not only her intent but the depth of abandonment that led her to it." The first evidence presented was the video will. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered on. There I was, weak but steady, staring into the camera. My voice filled the courtroom, heavy with truth. "Nathan, if you're watching this, then you already know. I've changed my will. I've left nothing for you. Because when I needed you, you told me to hire a nurse. You made it clear, you don't need a mother. So I won't leave you anything as obligation. Blood isn't love. Love is chosen." The room fell into a tense silence. Nathan shifted, his face pale under the judge's gaze. Next came the handwritten journals. Pages of my nights, my loneliness, my disappointment, my exhaustion. In my shaky handwriting, I had recorded every attempt to reach Nathan, the unanswered calls, the curt texts. My lawyer laid them out like fragile artifacts. These entries, contemporaneous, showed not only Mrs. Harper's state of mind but her clarity. She was not confused, she was heartbroken. Then came the medical certificate, signed by 2 doctors, affirming my mental capacity at the time of the will. The judge glanced at it, then at Nathan. "Your claim of incompetence seems challenged here, Mr. Harper." But the most devastating moment came when the head nurse took the stand. She stood tall, her scrubs crisp, her eyes unwavering. "I've been the charge nurse here for 15 years, she began. "And I can tell you this. Kira never once acted out of self-interest. She came to visit Mrs. Harper on days she wasn't even scheduled to work. She brought her food, cookies, tea. She sat with her when her own family didn't. Her voice sharpened. This wasn't manipulation. It was compassion. Kira's eyes filled with tears. Her head bowed as the nurse's words echoed in the room. For the first time since the trial began, I saw her shoulders straighten a little. Then Nathan was called to testify. He walked to the stand with confidence, adjusting his tie, forcing a mask of concern. "I love my mother," he said solemnly, "but she's sick. She doesn't know what she's saying. I have a family of my own. I can't be at the hospital every day. That doesn't mean I abandoned her. It's just not fair." The lawyer pressed. "Mr. Harper, is it true you responded to your mother's message about her diagnosis by telling her to hire a nurse?" Nathan hesitated, then smirked. "Yes, because it was practical. I couldn't drop everything. People need to take responsibility for themselves, too." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The lawyer leaned in. "So you admit that instead of supporting her, you delegated her care to strangers?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "I'm her son, not her servant. Isn't it enough that I built my own life? Do I have to babysit her, too?" The judge's brows furrowed. His words, intended as defense, instead rang like condemnation. His callousness filled the courtroom, exposing the emptiness of his claim to love. By the time closing arguments came, the room felt heavy with truth. My lawyer stood tall, his voice steady. "Your Honor, the heart of this case is not money. It is recognition. Recognition that a mother is not obligated to leave her legacy to a child who turned his back. Recognition that love cannot be demanded, only given. Mrs. Harper chose Kira because she showed up. Nathan did not." I watched the judge nod slowly, his eyes lingering on Nathan, whose face was now pale with anger. When the gavel finally struck, adjournment called, the air cracked with release. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, but I barely noticed. My gaze was on Kira, who sat beside me, trembling but no longer broken. "You heard them?" I whispered. "They saw you for who you are." She shook her head, tears spilling, but this time they weren't of shame. I didn't want you to regret choosing me." "Never," I said firmly. "Not for a moment." And as Nathan stormed out of the courtroom, his words still echoing about responsibility, I knew something with absolute certainty. I had not lost a son. I had gained a daughter. And the world had finally seen the difference. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above. Everyone sat frozen, reporters with pens poised, Nathan stiff in his chair, Kira beside me gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The judge adjusted his glasses, shuffled the papers before him, then cleared his throat. After careful review of the testimony, evidence, and supporting documentation, his voice was measured, steady, but every word hit like a drumbeat in my chest. "This court finds that the last will and testament of Mrs. Eloise Harper was executed while she was of sound mind and clear intent." My breath caught. The allegations of undue influence are unsupported. The court recognizes the will as valid and binding. The estate in its entirety will be transferred to the beneficiary named therein, Miss Kira Sullivan. For a moment the room was silent. Then gasps, scribbling pens, the clicking of cameras. Nathan shot to his feet. "This is a joke," he shouted, his voice trembling with fury. "She's been brainwashed. You can't just give away everything to some laundress." The judge struck his gavel sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Harper. This court has spoken." But Nathan wouldn't stop. "She's my mother, my blood. I'm the one who deserves it, not her." His words echoed off the walls, but they sounded hollow now, like the last cry of a man who had already lost. 2 bailiffs moved closer, and finally he sank back into his seat, his face red with rage, his fists clenched. Beside me, Kira sat frozen, her lips parted as though she couldn't breathe. Slowly, she turned toward me. Did we really win?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I reached for her hand, frail but steady. "No, Kira. You didn't just win. The truth won." She blinked rapidly, her eyes filling. For weeks she had been vilified, painted as a thief, a manipulator, and now, before the eyes of the court, she was recognized for what she truly was, a daughter who had chosen love when no one else did. Her tears fell freely, and this time she didn't try to hide them. Nathan stormed out the moment court adjourned, cameras flashing in his wake. He shoved past reporters, barking, "This isn't over." But even he must have known it was. The world had seen his anger, his entitlement, and the world had heard my voice. When the room finally emptied, I leaned toward Kira. My voice was soft, almost lost in the shuffle of papers and footsteps. I don't have much time left, I whispered, the truth heavy on my tongue. But I still had enough to love one last time. Her face crumpled as she squeezed my hand. Don't say that, she pleaded. We still have time. We still have more days. I smiled faintly. Days are never promised, child. But love is what we leave behind. And I've left mine with you. Outside the courthouse, the spring air was sharp and bright, the sky a pale blue streaked with thin clouds. Reporters swarmed, cameras thrust forward, microphones pushed close. Mrs. Harper, do you regret cutting your son out? One asked. Kira, how does it feel to inherit everything? Another shouted. I lifted my chin, my voice clear despite the weakness in my body. The only thing I regret is waiting so long to choose myself. As for inheritance, love cannot be stolen. It is given. And she earned it. Kira's hand tightened in mine as we made our way through the crowd, her body shielding me from the crush of questions. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I felt heard. And most of all, I felt free. The room was awash with golden light. It spilled through the curtains in thin ribbons, soft and warm against the pale walls. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, catching the glow as if time itself had slowed to watch. I lay in bed, my body fragile, each breath shallow and uneven, but my mind clear as crystal. For once the machines were silent. No nurses bustling in and out, no interruptions, just stillness. Kira sat beside me in the chair that had molded to her frame after weeks of vigil. A book rested open in her lap, her lips moving as she read in a low, steady voice. The words flowed gently, wrapping around me like a lullaby. It wasn't the story that mattered. It was her voice. The cadence, the warmth, the way she paused to glance at me to make sure I was still listening. When my fingers twitched, she noticed instantly. She closed the book carefully, tucking a ribbon between the pages. Do you want me to keep going? She asked. I shook my head faintly. My lips curved in the smallest smile. No, darling. Just stay. Just talk to me. Her eyes softened. She leaned closer, taking my frail hand into hers, her grip gentle but certain. Then I'll talk about anything. About everything. The hours unfolded in fragments of memory and quiet conversation. She fussed over the blanket, tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, brewed chamomile tea, though she knew I couldn't drink it anymore. The scent filled the air anyway, comforting, familiar. You always like this, she murmured, setting the cup beside me. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. The fragrance carried me back to mornings in the bakery, sunlight on the flour-dusted counter, Nathan as a boy sneaking sugar cubes when he thought I wasn't looking. The ache of those memories was sharp, but fleeting. Now, there was only her. Later, as the light shifted toward evening, Kira picked up the book again but didn't read. Instead, she began to hum softly, a tune I didn't recognize at first. Then it struck me. That's the old piano piece, I whispered. The one you heard from my bakery all those years ago. Her eyes widened. You remember? How could I forget? You told me once. That sound kept you from jumping. Her throat tightened, her voice trembling. It did. That melody was hope. And now, sitting here with you, it feels like everything came full circle. A tear slipped down my cheek. She brushed it away tenderly, her hand warm against my skin. As twilight painted the sky outside in hues of lavender and rose, my strength waned, my chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath shallower than the last. But my heart, strangely, felt lighter. I turned to her, gathering what little voice I had left. Kira! She leaned in instantly, her forehead nearly touching mine. I'm here, Mom. Always. My vision blurred, but I clung to her gaze. The words rose from the deepest place within. Me. An ache, a truth, a blessing. Kunjang kien me kam they juk lam me, du chi trong hung ngai kwoi. Her face crumpled, tears spilling freely now. She pressed my hand to her cheek, holding it there as if to anchor me. And you made me feel like a daughter, she whispered through her sobs, for the first time in my life. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Of love, of grief, of everything unspoken between us. The last of the sunlight slipped away, leaving the room bathed in soft shadows. My eyelids grew heavy. My breaths came slower, gentler, until each one felt like a gift. Her voice was the last tether, the last light. She whispered to me, steady, soothing, refusing to let me drift alone. And as the darkness closed in, I realized I was not afraid. Because love, unexpected, chosen, undeniable, had found me, even at the end. Months passed. The grief lingered, but time had softened its edges. On a crisp morning in early spring, Kira stood in front of a weathered storefront in the coastal town of Seabridge. The paint had peeled, the windows clouded from years of neglect, but she recognized it instantly. Eloise's bakery. Her hand trembled as she unlocked the door. The bell above the frame chimed faintly, a ghost of the past. Inside, dust clung to the counters, but the faint scent of flour seemed to linger in the walls, as if the soul of the place had been waiting. Kira closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm home." Renovation wasn't easy. She scrubbed walls, repainted wood, polished glass until her arms ached. Volunteers from the hospital came on weekends, nurses, orderlies, even the head nurse who had testified in court. They remembered Eloise. They wanted to help. And slowly the bakery breathed again. The ovens glowed once more. The scent of butter and sugar wafted through the street. The glass cases filled with golden loaves, frosted cakes, and rows of cookies just like Eloise used to make. But it wasn't just a bakery anymore. Above the door hung a new sign, painted carefully in bold letters, Hearth Bakery, where mothers are never forgotten. On the first day it opened, the little shop was alive with chatter. Children pressed their noses to the glass, pointing at muffins. Couples lingered over coffee. And at 2 tables near the window, reserved with simple cards that read, "For Mothers," something extraordinary happened. Every Thursday afternoon, those 2 tables belonged to women who lived alone. Widows, grandmothers, single mothers, women whose children lived far away or didn't call at all. Here, they weren't invisible. They were celebrated. One Thursday, a silver-haired woman named Agnes leaned back in her chair, sipping tea as she shared stories of her youth. Her laugh rang out, bright and unrestrained, as she told of the time she danced barefoot at a summer fair in 1956. Across from her, another woman wiped her eyes, not from sorrow, but from laughter. And in the corner, a young server scribbled furiously in a notebook. Kira had asked her to capture these stories. "One day," she explained, "we'll make a book of mothers' memories, so they'll never fade." The girl grinned. "A memory cookbook." Kira smiled softly. Yes, a book Eloise would have loved. Sometimes Kira caught herself pausing mid-shift, standing by the counter as the voices filled the room, the clink of teacups, the hum of conversation, the smell of sugar caramelizing in the oven. She would look to the corner table and almost see Eloise there, her hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea, her smile patient, her eyes kind. The ache of missing her never fully left. But each day, surrounded by warmth, Kira felt it transform into something gentler. Love didn't die with Eloise. It lived here, in every loaf of bread, every shared story, every laugh at the mothers' tables. One evening, after closing, Kira stood at the door, the street outside washed in twilight. She locked up, then lingered for a moment, gazing at the glowing sign above. Hearth Bakery. She touched the wooden frame, her throat tight. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. "Your love didn't end with you. It's here. It always will be." And as she walked away, the bell above the door gave a soft chime, as though Eloise herself had whispered back. The bakery was empty, the last warmth of the ovens fading into the soft hush of evening. Chairs were stacked, tables wiped down to a dull shine. Outside, the coastal street had settled into that blue-hour quiet, gulls wheeling against a dimming sky, the sea breathing in its steady rhythm. Kira lingered behind the counter, reluctant to go. Some nights felt heavier than others. Night air settling into the bones, memory pressing at the edges of the room. She reached for the old row of glass jars Eloise had kept for decades. Thick-walled, stubborn lids, labels written in that looping, careful hand, flour, sugar, cinnamon. Most had been replaced, but one jar remained tucked far back on the shelf, clouded with age and a fine film of dust. It felt heavier than it should. She twisted the lid. The faint, clean scent of flour rose, a ghost of mornings long gone. Buried beneath a thin, powdery layer, her fingertips brushed paper. Kira froze. She eased out a small envelope, the edges softly yellowed, her name written across the front in the unmistakable curve of Eloise's script. Kira. Her breath snagged. She unfolded it with careful hands, as if it might crumble if she rushed. "My dear Kira, If you're reading this, I've slipped beyond the door you cannot follow yet. Don't let the thought of it hollow you out. I left this world with a fullness I didn't think possible, because I was loved to the end. You walked into my life like morning light in a room that had forgotten windows. I had stopped looking to be found, and somehow you still found me. You reminded me that family isn't made by blood. It's made by those who stay, who listen, who show up with their whole heart. Keep this close when doubt comes for you. Family doesn't need to share the same blood. It only needs to share the same heartbeat. And you, Kira, you are my heart. Don't spend your days measuring whether you were enough. You were more than enough. You gave laughter to rooms saturated in silence, warmth to a bed cooled by absence. You let me be a mother again, and that gift mended more than the body ever could. Carry the bakery forward, not just for bread and sugar, but as a hearth where no woman is invisible. Keep 2 tables waiting each week for the mothers who come alone. Learn their names, gather their stories, stitch them into a book so memory has a place to live. That will be my truest legacy. And when you miss me, you will go to the sea. Let the tide speak. I'll be somewhere in the hush between the waves, with all a mother's love. Eloise's tears dotted the page before she realized she was crying. The words blurred, but the meaning burned steady, as if the ink itself carried heat. Kira pressed the letter to her chest and let the silence of the shop fill around her, flower dust floating in the air like snow, the faintest trace of chamomile lingering from the afternoon pot, the bell over the door still and patient. She sat on the low stool behind the counter for a long time. If she closed her eyes, she could almost hear Eloise humming that old halting piano melody, notes she'd once played to keep loneliness from swallowing the room whole. How a melody could hold a life together seemed like magic. But then, so did this letter. So did the way love had arrived and stayed. When the clock above the espresso machine ticked through the top of the hour, Kira stood. She slid the letter into her coat pocket, fingers grazing it as if to make sure it was real. She turned the lights one by one, the bakery softening into shadow, the display case giving back the last reflections of street lamps and twilight. At the door, she looked up at the hand-painted sign, Hearth Bakery, where mothers are never forgotten, and touched the wood like you touch the shoulder of someone you trust. The night air was cool and salt-bright. She locked up and walked toward the cliff path without really deciding to, feet remembering what the heart needed before words caught up. The ocean opened ahead, black, blue, and endless, the horizon a thin seam of silver where the last light refused to let go. She had brought a small bouquet from the counter, a handful of wildflowers in a bakery glass, stems still damp. At the overlook, wind combed through her hair and tugged at the hem of her coat. She knelt and loosened her fingers. The flowers tilted, then slipped free, petals snared by the wind, spinning, skimming, surrendering to the tide. They scattered like blessings. Kira drew the letter out once more. She didn't read it again. She just held it, palm warm against paper that had carried a voice across the distance death pretends to make final. The surf pounded and receded, the ancient heartbeat Eloise had promised. Somewhere between crash and hush, Kira let the words rise, not as a shout but as a truth spoken to the only witness that could hold it. I found home. The wind carried it away, or maybe it carried it back. It didn't matter. The words were true before they left her mouth. Home was not beams and shingles, not even this beloved shop with its ovens and sugar-bright mornings. Home was the steady place inside that love had cleared and tended, the place where a woman who had never been chosen was chosen at last, and a mother who had been abandoned was a mother again. She slid the letter safely back into her pocket and stood. The tide kept breathing, lights flickered on in distant houses. In the bakery windows behind her, night gathered, patient and gentle. Tomorrow there would be dough to mix, tables to reserve, names to learn, stories to record. Tomorrow, the bell would ring and the door would open and someone would step through who needed a seat, a slice, a soft question. Tell me about her. Tell me about you. Kira turned from the sea and began the walk back, past the low fence grown rough with salt, past the dune grass, whispering close to the ground. The sign above the bakery door glowed faintly, a lighthouse in miniature. She smiled, unlocked the door, and set the wildflower glass on the counter, petals still damp from the ocean air. She did not feel alone. Love had outlived the body it first arrived in. It had learned the shape of her hands. It had learned a new name for family and practiced it until it fit. It was already making the morning. And somewhere, in the hush between the waves, a melody kept playing, imperfect, tender enough.